All right. Welcome back to another episode of Kitchen Table Talk, a Break the Stigma podcast, real unfiltered conversation about first responder mental health and wellness happen. I'm Michael Long, firefighter paramedic and founder of Break the Stigma Inc. Show is a place for all of us as firefighters, EMTs, officers, dispatchers, and other medical professionals. Pull up a chair, share their stories, talk about the parts of the job that most of us don't get to see. Here, we're going to laugh, we'll reflect, we'll learn, and we'll remind each other that it's okay to not be okay, because mental health is just as vital as physical health. Together, we can break the stigma. So grab a cup, take your seat, and join us at the table for this episode of Kitchen Table Talk. As always, our wonderful co-host has returned, Nick Robben.
Hey, I'm back, guys. What's up? As always, today's episode is proudly sponsored by Nestwell Roof and Exterior, a first responder owned and operated roofing and exterior company serving the St. Louis area. Nestwell understands the importance of trust, integrity, and showing up when it matters most because they live the life of service themselves. From roof repairs and replacements to siding, gutters, and storm damage, Nestwell delivers quality work with the same dedication they brought to serving our communities. When you support Nestwell, you're supporting a business that continues to give back to first responders and their families. So check them out at nestwellstl.com on Facebook and Instagram under NestwellSTL, and let them know you heard about us on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Nick. And today we have two special guests. I think this is going to be a really good episode on a topic that we haven't really hit much other than when we had Lindsay and Dina on. But kind of from firsthand experience, we've Heather and James on to talk with us. So Heather is the spouse of a first responder, obviously James being the first responder. Um, Kind of coming on here telling their story about their struggles with their mental wellness, mental health, how it was like, what it was like being a spouse of a responder, how that impacted their families, and then also kind of how they prevailed through some of those issues. So another firsthand experience on kind of what it is like to be part of a first responder family or a first responder. So from here, I will not butcher any more introductions like I normally do, and I'll let Heather and James take it from here.
Hi, we're Heather and James Parmley. Um, we just wanted to kind of tell our story today. Um, James has been how long have you been a first responder? Let's see, like 38 years now.
38 years, yeah.
Not aging him or anything, but we've been married 14 years. Back in 2021, but December of 2021, so very latter part of 21, he did get COVID. And if you can remember back to that time, that's the time that you could not be with them at all if they were in the hospital. So, and he fought it hard at home for a few weeks. So into December, January 4th was the first time that I took him to the ER. His O2 at that time. He was very sick. I think it was like 84. Sent him home, no oxygen. He's fine. And again, you're just dropping him off at the ER. You couldn't be with him. Um, so he called me, said he was good to go. Sent him home, no oxygen. He made it 2 more days, actually 3 more days. So on the 7th of January that year, I took him back to the ER. And again, you just had to drop him off. You couldn't be with him. He called me again, said I'm good to go. At that time, his O2 was actually 82, and they still sent him home, no oxygen. So by this time, I'm actually getting oxygen tanks from the one of the districts that he worked for, filling them myself because he needs oxygen. you know. So he made it actually 2 more days at home, and he was on O2 at that time, just 1 liter. I think his O2 is actually up to like 89, which was okay for him at that time. Um, we thought we were getting past it, and again, he had been sick for weeks. So by this point, he absolutely hated me because I was the only one there. Nobody could, and a lot of his guys from the ambulance district and stuff came by and checked on him and stuff. So they knew what he looked like and told me just on the oxygen end because I didn't just understanding it all. just being that deprived of oxygen, he doesn't really know what's going on, just trying to explain to me, you know.
Which explains a lot now. My oxygen was low, so
So, but um no, so like I said, he made it 2 more days, and January 9th, I had he was like living in the recliner because he couldn't lay flat. So um we were in the living room, and I had just taken his temperature. It was like 98. Taken his pulse ox, which he hated that thing on his finger. He just, he's crabby. He just didn't feel good. So very sick, very sick. But so and then that night, I think his O2 was like 89 or something, and I laid down on the couch, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm probably actually going to get a good night's sleep tonight. While I laid down, and it wasn't 5 minutes later, he started what you would call guppy breathing, and I sat straight up and put the pulse ox back on him, and it was 71. So immediately called 911, and he was gray, gray. So, and one of the medics that had actually seen him earlier in the week came around the corner and said, "Oh no." So I knew then that it was bad. And at that time, you're just kind of, again, you couldn't be with him. So I'm just sending him off. Um, and I think he has some memory from that, as far as the his chief of his district actually came out and actually drove the ambulance that night to the hospital, and he realized then, oh man, I'm I'm really sick. So um again, once he got to the hospital, it was an automatic 20 days isolation. I couldn't be with him. I didn't hear from him. I never heard from the hospital once. So if you can put yourself in that mindset. And at that time, again, there was a lot of other first responders very sick at the same time, going downhill fast. So you try not to think of any of that, but man, it was hard not to go there. So um, I finally heard from him. So that was a Sunday that I called the ambulance, and I finally heard from him that Wednesday of that week. Um, he, I had every prayer warrior praying for him, and less than 5 days. So it went from an automatic 20 days isolations to less than 5 days. That Friday, the nurse called me and said, "He's ready. Come get him." And I'm like, "I'm not ready." You can keep him at this point. I'm not ready. Um, so and he was released that Friday, and he needed 0 oxygen, which the doctors, nurses still have no explanation for his healing. So we will put that one to the man upstairs definitely, because there is no, rhyme or reason on how he recovered so quickly, so quickly. And just and you have to know, the whole time that he was in the hospital, those 5 days, we're thinking that he's one of going to be maybe a forever COVID patient, oxygen the rest of his life. Our whole lives have changed, so we're just trying to navigate all that as well. So, um, just the fact that he needed no oxygen, I mean, that was, you know, um, so when he actually came home, of course, he gets out of the hospital, and in true James Parmley fashion, "W I'm good. What what's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I'm gonna need a minute." So, instead of, it's kind of the reversed side where, first responders, see things and everything. Well, I saw, you know, my husband very gray, and it was traumatic, it was very traumatic. And anybody that goes through that needs to know that it's okay to be traumatized from that. you know, you're not used to seeing that. And he definitely, um, once we, there's a pre-COVID James and Heather, and there's an after COVID James and Heather. Now, I was that wife that was always, who's this girl you're working with? Just your mind, it's hard when you're a first responder spouse and they're working with females, or they're working with, and I was always that not so much, but just the dishes aren't done, texting them just the things that were wrong at home. Now, never, it is, how's your day? It's just totally changed our whole lives as far as perspective on um, just how we go day to day. Very grateful for, mm, I don't know how we even explain that.
Uh,
But we're definitely changed because of it, because of all of this. Now, I will tell you, it took me a long time to reach out, and that's my biggest message is working on in mental health and everything. I still didn't recognize the signs. I missed all of the red flags, um, little things that you should be able to navigate. My daughter spilling her medicine in the morning, I would completely just lose it. Why? Why do we do that to ourselves? That should be what, red flag number one. Not sleeping at night. He would go and, here he was so sick and it took him so long to get fit for duty back on the truck. And here I am sending him back to a dangerous job. And any call that he would get, I mean, it could even just be a vehicle accident, and I would panic, you know? Um, 48-hour shifts, the whole 48-hour shifts, I was not sleeping for over a year. Why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we wait so long to just get that help? So, once I finally did reach out, and, they'd give you the usual PHQ-9 and GAD, what is it, GAD-7 or whatever, and mine were very high, the scores. And working in mental health, I should have recognized that, and my counselor said to me, um, "What are we gonna do about those scores?" And I'm like, "Probably get them down a little bit," So, yeah, when I first went in, I think, I had, like, my PHQ-9 was like a score of 24, when he did it a year later. I mean, it takes hard work. That you're putting in the time. I was seeing him weekly for over a year. Um, and he tested me again and my score was 1. So, I mean, just the difference there, and then on the GAD 7, I think is what it's called, but yeah, I mean, I scored high on that too. That was 18, and then the year later it was a 4. So, again, I still have, um Jamie's very good at now knowing my little triggers or whatever you want to call them, to just simple message, babe, I'm good. If he has a bad call or whatever, he will just send me just a simple text, everything's good. That's all I need to hear, on that end, the spouse end. um, we've just totally changed everything as far as the way we talk to each other, the way we hardly ever fought anyway, just because as a responder family, the last, as they're going out the door, that could be the last time you see them. But so we really didn't fight anyway. But now it's really just him knowing, ooh, this could set Heather off. Because I have diagnosed PTS from his, being in the hospital and just the unknown. um, it was scary. Yes, ours is not, and I will admit, mine is not the most, you know, tr traumatizing story anybody's ever heard, but to me, yeah, it was very scary, very scary. So, you just have to know the red flags and how to, um, reach out for help before waiting a year, way too long, way too long. So,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers there, and Mike and I have been doing this long enough to kind of listen to that story, and we see a lot of the things that we talk about, especially in the dynamic that you guys had, where it's the first responder who is sick or injured, and then the spouse being the caretaker, and kind of how that first responder bounces back. So part of being a first responder is our resiliency, and just like James got out of the hospital, came home, like, okay, let's get back to work, because he never stopped thinking about it, he never stopped thinking about the job, never stopped thinking about the guys. And oftentimes we don't recognize putting the job before our family and those check-ins, working backwards in with our spouses, or how that may have affected, our home life. And there's a lot of times as a first responder where we kind of get away with near misses, and we just go, "Oh, that was close." And then we move on. But, for somebody else who, isn't in that setting where they see it for the first time, or now we have an emergency at home and we're, not at the firehouse, we're not at the ambulance base, or we're not at work. It's so different. And, I can see in this story, James really moving forward with what happened to him, and then you're just kind of stuck with. I think you were stuck with. I'm putting words in your head, but the almost like what could have been.
Right.
And you go back to listening to the story and all the isolation. So, now we're 5 years removed from the way the world was during
Mhm.
2021 and COVID. And I don't think that people realize the effect of isolation. Now, when you say it was only 5 days, that's technically not true. From the time that he got sick and you began to worry about him to the point where you're taking your spouse to the ER, really for anything, then we start seeing that isolation. Number two, with his low oxygen level, he was present, but he probably wasn't himself, So you're talking about like a month of being sick and then ends on this really traumatic event where, your first responder spouse is now removed from your home by first responders. And the people that he worked with and that other family that you have. So, it's like you said, it's maybe not the most intense story that we could hear. But the effect that it had and how long it kind of stayed with you really speaks to kind of the more general, um, spousal relationships that we see with first responders and how we react to these things that we're bringing home or these things that are happening to us or just how we communicate, with our spouse. And I think this is a really interesting way to start, this conversation. Your situation is not like Mike's situation.
Right.
Um, and then, the after effects and the healing and the things that have to go on. And the other thing that's changed forever in you now is your awareness level of the things that are going to affect you as that first responder spouse.
Right.
Because I think early on, before this, those kind of things didn't bother you or weren't on your radar. But here
Right.
we have that near miss, and all of a sudden, everything's changed because in those 5 days in your isolation, I'm sure you thought of every single worst case scenario.
You do.
And then you just wait for those to start, playing out. And that's where you just really you get that kind of overstimulated anxiety that just really hangs on for a long time. And we see this in first responders too. We'll get trapped in these overstimulated anxiety cycles, and then it just becomes part of life. And like you said, you're taking those tests and you're failing them miserably, but you were still going through life.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that you're like, okay, how do I fix it? How did I get here? And
Right.
like Mike always says, you don't generally for most cases you don't break in a day. Um, so the time that it took you to get spun up to that was very short, but the amount of time it took you to fix it is really, when we talk about mental health, something that's incredibly important to focus on is you can have a short duration traumatic event, and you can, no matter the level of trauma, it can still do serious damage. It can take over a year, even with your background in mental health, even over a year just to get back to what's normal. But Heather, are you ever going to be normal again?
I don't know. I don't know. No, I feel like I'm stronger now than I've ever been, you know. Um, yes, it's taken work, you know. I still see my counselor every 2 weeks, you know. Um, and I'm just one of those that I have to unpack the bag, and go see the counselor. Um, but yeah, uh, you know, he really has helped out a lot more at home too. I mean, we've just changed everything. We've changed everything, before he goes on shift now. Um, one of the things he makes sure is like the just little things, the trash empty, stuff like, that before I'd be, you know, messaging him crabbing about. Now, I mean, it's just totally different for us. Totally. And you notice those little things too. Last week, um, I went to start my van. Well, I didn't drive my van that night. Like he had parked it, but he had went and got gas and he had parked it. So the automatic start and just the little things where he had put it on defrost. Well, I noticed that. I'm like, thanks, babe. You always take care of me, like seriously. So just little things like that. And I can tell you, even I mean, they even gave me the PTS test or whatever, and that was I think my score was 67, and I think 33 or higher is so 67 was just off the charts. There was no doubt that um definitely still, it was just very traumatizing. And
I think you first, I'll touch on Robin's comment of normal. I still have a hard time with the word normal. It
right.
is definitely a state of mind created by social and psychological features. If I consider myself normal, but to the social norms, I'm far from it. But I think kind of part of your story that is unique, to the fact that the first responder being the one that is on the end of being needing of care is one of the things that I think most people don't think about, especially from the first responder side of and thinking about the spouse, significant other at home, the family at home, is the spouse always thinks about, this could be the last time, they walk out that door. This could be the last time, they go into shift or whatever. And we all know that in the back of our mind, but we don't acknowledge it, just like any other traumatic event that I mean, every day is as a gamble with your life, but we make it at a higher risk by doing the jobs we do. And I'll tell you, we think about it at times where I go to work and I'm thinking at home, like, oh, we catch the fire, we get a collapse, whatever. And, did I tell my family goodbye? Did I tell the girls I love them? Whatever it was. And I think that's what makes it hard and why that challenge and that traumatic experience was worse for you. And I could imagine for any spouse that deals with it is you got to live the experience that we all know in the back of our minds is a possibility that, the spouse or the first responder could leave the house and not come back. Now, was it in the relation of getting on the truck and not, something bad happening on a call? That's one thing, but you now have in the back of your mind, and I could be wrong, but I would imagine this is probably how you're feeling, is that that every time he walks out the door, it's an even more enlightened feeling of this could be the last time. Whereas the rest of us that haven't had those near misses, or I'm sure we've all had those near misses in the field, and I can be completely honest, if I've had my handful, and I'm not the first one to call my wife and be like, "Hey, I almost died at work today," um, because we're trying to protect them at the same time. But I think once it becomes more of a reality that the one thing we know is true, but it's more of a reality now, I think can put that even more traumatizing, effect on the individual or the spouse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he does a really good job of knowing, oh man, if he has a bad call, like I said, I mean, he just had one not too long ago that was actually a fatal fire that he was on, and he didn't have his phone because he left it at the station. But he calls me from like the captain's phone or whatever, and I'm like, so then I'm like, what's wrong? But he's like, no, I just knew that you're probably watching the news and you're seeing that this is, but everything's good. We're still here, just little things like that, that before, we just never would have, he's had rough calls before and stuff like that. But um, there's definitely, when we talk pre-COVID and after COVID, we're night and day different people all around, just more.
But it probably gives you a new meaning to the relationship. Not that it wasn't a strong relationship to begin with, but
Right.
that knowing that the end is actual possible. Mortality is a hard thing for our brains to wrap around. We're all very aware that we're mortal and that there is an end at some point, but we all assume we have 20, 30, 40, 50 more years, or that it won't be the next day, or it won't be a week or whatever. But I think once that gets put in your forefront of your brain, it becomes even more prominent as a thought. And I'm pretty good about it at work, where I'll, if I'm not busy, I shoot a text, or if it's running a call for a long time, I'll shoot it, I'll even call. And I've done that before too, where I didn't have my phone. So I used, partner's phone or somebody else on the truck, just to shoot Cheyenne a text and say, hey, we're good. Sorry, we're busy. Everything's all right. And I can only imagine on the other end of the phone how much of a relief it must be to know that, okay, not only do we know
Yes.
they're all right, but also, hey, they're also thinking of me while they're going
Right.
through all of this stuff. Because when we're
Right.
on calls, our brains are tunnel visioned into what are we doing on this call? Um, who are we saving? How are we doing it? And, you would think most of us wouldn't be thinking about our families at home when we're trying to put fires out or save someone's life or whatever it is. But in the back of our minds, we're still, I think a lot of it makes us think of home more often than it doesn't, because especially if it's something we can relate back to home. No, that's an awesome thing that it's weird. And I always say awesome. It's a weird way to put it. It's amazing how a traumatic experience can change a person and a family and a couple for the better. We look at these situations as the worst thing that's ever happened to us, the worst traumatic experience we've ever had. And then they're in the moment, it's the absolute worst thing. But post traumatic incident, we thrive. But it takes unique individuals, and definitely the right treatments and the right care and the right dynamic between the family to thrive in a situation like that. And kind of as you explained, taking a year. And if I'm putting the timeline together, was that a year until you seeked out help, and then another
Yeah.
year to
A
get
year
to,
and 4 months,
yeah.
actually. I mean,
And that's, I think, a challenge we all face too, as first responders and spouses and everything else. We all know, and anybody that listens to this or has ever talked about mental health, or even in their own brain thought about it, we're all really aware of what the signs are. They're not
right.
rocket science. They're not. None of this is groundbreaking, like being studied today to figure out the answers for tomorrow. This has been going on for hundreds of years, and we already know the answers. But we're so good at just avoiding them and ignoring them.
Yeah. I'm
And then,
good.
and
I'm
yeah,
good.
and then in your case, one of the major signs and one of the major issues of, mental wellness is isolation, and you are being forced into isolation in an already traumatic experience. Um, and then to combat that is just a challenge. But no, I would love to hear more about kind of post COVID and all of these things, and how working together now as a first responder family. Um, I know you'd said like the text message and things like that. You brought up one that was great, was the, not getting on James as much when he's at work about things that were not done at home. Because I know there's a lot of things that I forget to do when I walk out the door, and then you get that wonderful text 36 hours into 48, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, I need you to fix this. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? I don't have the truck at home, or I can't bring the truck home, or I'm 40 minutes, whatever it is.
Right.
Um, I think it's a challenge. And as a spouse, going through 48-hour shifts, or 24, or whatever, your spouse works as a first responder, what are the unique challenges with that? And what are ways you combat that, knowing that they're gone?
As far as, is that for me or Jamie? Me.
Both, either.
Both.
Give us the insight on how to be the great couple.
Uh, Well, I would say actually, for so post COVID, you know, we're used to seeing people like I was, gray, not breathing, So I wouldn't say it's not a big deal where they're not used to seeing that, and then when it's your spouse, and when you're the one that has to call 911 for the guy that usually is, what I'm saying, the 911, and then when your chief shows up, and when your person that you work with most of the time comes around the corner in your door and says, "Oh," but uses a different four-letter word that starts with an F, that's when you're like, "Oh, okay, I really am sick." And then when you get loaded into the ambulance and they're putting you on BiPAP, and all you hear is the chief say, I'm driving, we're going to the hospital. If you're not going, get out of the truck because I'm leaving now. That kind of put him like, oh, okay, I am sick, But then once you go through the hospital stuff, and luckily we have friends that were nurses
Yes,
there, so they
that's
were giving her information and they were bringing me stuff from home and stuff.
yes,
So we had that
yes. I
going
will
far as
say,
too.
the one nurse reached out and said, Heather, these young guys that get in here that are so sick, especially then with COVID, a lot of them are vented, they can't move, and pictures. Do you have pictures? Well, who has printed out pictures these days as far as, so I
Right.
was just running around. I'm like, even pictures of the dog. I'm like, just come home to me. Come home. And actually that was the first turnaround as far as getting, she hung the pictures up and whatever. And so that was the first little turnaround. And then the one nurse was like, because of course he's in the hospital, so he's watching the news. I'm like, turn off the TV. Turn off the TV. He had a stack of fire books that had been on his dresser forever. So I sent those. I'm like, just read your read your stuff. I sent actually our daughter's Bible and he said, Heather, I opened it up and it had your handwriting in it, that he said I lost it. And that was a hard thing too, because that was that Wednesday when I finally got to talk to him and it was on FaceTime and he's sobbing. All the alarms are going off. He's still on probably 30 liters of oxygen at that time. I mean, it was and he's sobbing and you can't hug him, you couldn't be there. So just yeah, little things like that. But that Wednesday, just sending those little things from home, that was the second turnaround. And I mean, I don't have any explanation for his healing, but yeah, we've definitely gotten closer as a couple, gotten closer to God, just because we know that army out there praying for us had every bit to do with his healing.
Yeah.
So,
James,
but
how was it? And comfortable or not, it's up to you. How was it as being, experiencing it, like you were saying, as
So
being
I
the
mean,
first responder on the other side of the issues.
you mean like for like the ER room and then getting admitted and all that.
yeah,
So
because
Yeah,
he was
because
in ER
we're really
over
good at
24 hours.
when there's something wrong with us. We
There's
just
no
like, oh, it'll be
remorse.
fine. I'll
right,
go when I'm dead,
right.
or when I'm
Yeah.
dead, take me to the firehouse and
Well,
get paid more.
right, right. Well, we go in, we drop them off, give a report, and we leave.
Yeah,
You just get your truck back together and you're ready for the next one. But so I got to experience that side of it when you're in the ER room and the doctors and they're trying to figure out what to do. And then this lady comes in and asking you, do you want to be intubated? Do you want this? Do you want CPR? And you're like, wait a minute. We, what are you talking about?
fine. It's a
That's the
checkup.
part we don't see. So at that point, it became a reality check that, oh, I may not make it out of here, you know? And, so you're just doing all things and he's like, yeah, I guess, and like, I don't know. Cause we always joke, no, no, I don't want it. Cause we see the 90-year-olds that don't have a DNR and they want everything done. And you're like, well, that's not me. I don't want anything,
Yeah,
once
yeah,
I get, and so then it makes you second guess. You're like, yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, I want all that. And so then when I got to a regular room, like I said,
ICU.
the ICU, luckily I was never intubated. I was on this,
It was close.
they called it a vapotherm. It was like 80% oxygen at 30 liters a minute. And it was like a turbocharged nasal cannula that just,
Hmm.
I mean, and the biggest bag of saline I've ever seen was hanging there. And that's what they used and it was warm and moist, and it's like, I've never seen that much oxygen, especially in a nasal cannula. And, but once we got to the regular room, I guess I was on that for a couple days in the ICU, and then I was able to get to a step down room, I guess on day 3 or 4,
Yeah.
and I was able to then really, because I was in a room by myself, and they were coming in every 10 minutes checking on me, that I was able to contact her quite a bit, and then and then once you get home, you're like, "Okay, everything's good," you know?
Move on,
you
pull your boots
and
up,
you
and move
don't
on.
realize her side of it, and you're like, and I think there was a one time I said, "What's the matter with you? I'm the one that went through that, and I didn't die. I'm good. What's wrong with you?"
Sounds like a
And
first responder.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Did
And
you guys so months after it, Heather's struggling. Did you guys ever end up in couples counseling together?
We did not.
yeah,
Yeah, the reason I asked this came up too in episode 2. I think it's interesting for first responders a lot of times where to start. Because some people don't know, should I start on myself
right.
and then go to couples counseling? Or should we go to couples counseling and then basically, that professional
Right.
says you both got problems. Now you both got to go. And then we found out that that's separate practitioners as well. But it was just interesting in the circumstance that you guys had. You kind of had this crossroads of where do I start? And Mike and I have talked about this, several times on the podcast. I think that is the most difficult part in mental health for first responders is, where do I start? It would have been interesting in a way that, you as a couple went through something and you started, um, with maybe we should go, but, it ended up being individual. But I think it's important too. What we see here is you took the time to recognize the signs and then get the help. But what I always go back to with the conversation that we've had today, and you are really good at unknowingly proving the point constantly. You guys keep going back to everything changed. Everything changed, everything changed. But what really changed was you guys started doing the little things for each other.
Mhm.
So, from James's side, the constant check-ins from work, just to kind of ease your 48-hour mind of him being gone. And then you kind of pulling back on, I guess, what we would call nagging for,
Right.
but that's where we start to see like a lot more healthy relationship, without the counseling. It's these simple takeaways from traumatic events that we can, afterwards, what worked. And in both cases, for both of you, it's these little things that keep coming up. And in any relationship with a first responder, spousal situation, we see that the biggest difference is the little things. So, I think that's an excellent take home point from today is how are we going to work with our spouse to make the little things the priority that kind of helps the big thing?
Well, and I think Nick, you did a great job there, and I love that point, and I think that's exactly the way we should look at it. But how do we make the first responder? Because we'll pick on first responders, and not the spouses. 'Cause I have one of those, and I'm not about to pick on her on a podcast that they will listen to. But is as a first responder, how do we make ourselves notice those little things? And it's a blatant question, and it's more of a rhetorical. There's always different answers, but how do we find those little things that help our spouse through those 48 hours or the 96 hours they have to deal with us,
Mhm.
without it having to be a traumatic experience, bringing them out? Like we talk about the change and the pre-COVID, post-COVID change and how things are now, but how simple would it have been pre-COVID to have already had those little things set up and be doing them? And it takes a traumatic experience or that near miss or that, those things getting the worst of the worst before we're like, oh, we need to make that change. Um, and I think it's a challenge. I think that's something like we can take away from today, like, like Nick said, those little things is start noticing those little things throughout the day, throughout those 48 hours or throughout the 96. And I'm guilty of it. I'm just as bad about forgetting about the little things. Um, but how do we make those the regular things? It doesn't need to be a change. It should be the regular. Uh, Passing that forward to the rest of the first responder families out there. And like I said, more of a rhetorical question, unless somebody's got a groundbreaking answer to it.
Right. We're just more just looking at the grateful. We're just grateful, the things that we are grateful for. And we point them out, like I said, just the little things of putting the defrost on my van. So when I did the auto start, it was the ice melted, just little things like that. I'm like, thank you. Because Lord knows I would have parked the van and it still would have been, we're in Missouri, so Missouri weather, it probably would have been on air conditioning. And so the ice, just, and he pays attention to little details like that. Not like he didn't before, but I notice them more, and I thank him for that. And like I said, our texts are more just love you, it's not bickering about what's going on at home or anything like that. It's more just have a great shift, love you, that's all it needs,
I
to
guess.
be.
Go. Sorry, Heather. I didn't mean to cut you
Go
off.
ahead.
No, I
No.
was gonna say. I guess one of the things too is, and to pick on you a little bit, because that's the point, right?
Right.
Is well, those little things, and we circle back to Robin said the, for lack of better terms, nagging and stuff. It's like if the first responder does those little things, not out of wanting the pats on the back and the recognition though, but just those little things, does that change? Does that help change? Keep your mentality strong. Keep yourself in a good place to when he does walk out the door for 48 hours. You know, it's not one of those things where you're constantly circling back to all the negatives. You're reminding yourself of, well, hey, he turned the defrost on me. He unloaded the dishwasher before he left. The
Right.
trash went out when he was walking out the door. Kind of those little things. And I think that's a powerful thing that as a first responder we can. I think that we probably fail out regularly, trying to do those little things. But from your side of it is, when you notice those little things, does it the nagging at bay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Usually the only time it happens now is if like our daughter Sid does something, and then it's your daughter. You know. But I would say just like she talked about the fire. Our shift change when I was working when I'm at the firehouse at 7. That call came in at 5:30. So shift changes in that morning. New shift's coming on. Well, it was a fatal. So we were second due. So we're stuck there. The fire marshal's there. So you don't know how long it's going to be. So I'm like, and I didn't take my phone because when you're dispatched to the fire with reported person trapped for sure. Neighbors are reporting there's some whatever. So I was like, crap. And I'm looking around. I'm like, after everything was done, the fire marshal's there. I'm like, I better call because then you see the news cameras come walking down. You're like, better let Heather know because we do have Life 360 because mainly because we keep track of my father after my mom passed away, and we have a family one. So I'm like, she's gonna look and see my phone is still at the firehouse, and it's 7:30. I'm supposed to be shift change at 7.
Where are you?
So luckily the ambulance was there, and I jumped in there because I don't, the ambulance. We have a ambulance phone, so I call her, and obviously she don't have that number, you know, and it come in as an unknown number. Look, I think I had to call you twice or just
No,
once.
I answered.
Yeah, she picked it up, and I was like, "Hey, this is me. Just let you know what's going on. Everything's good. I don't know when I'm getting out of here." So, and she's like, "Oh, okay." Of course, she'd been listening to it. We come home, both pagers are on. So,
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I guess
bad.
that's could be a nerve. I didn't think about that. The nerve wracking side of, we think about late trips as a pain in the ass, and we're all mad because we're getting held over and that.
right,
But we don't think about the significant other at home that's expecting us to walk through the door at 7:30. And when we're on
right,
that call, it's whether you have your phone or not, depending on what you're doing, you're not pulling it out to shoot a text or make a call. And
right,
next thing you know, it's 7:45. You haven't walked through the door. You know, what is your spouse thinking at that point in time? Because I'm sure,
right,
as any other human brain, it's not going to the, oh, well, he's probably stopping to get me flowers and chocolate and donuts on the way home. It's probably like, oh no, something happened. Um,
right.
Right.
no, I
Yeah.
think that's a very challenging aspect from the spouse side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just little things like that. Like probably pre-COVID, I'd have been like,
She's
She'll
fine.
figure it out when I get home.
Yeah.
She'll figure it out.
Yeah.
right.
She's fine.
She'll see it on the news.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, just little things like before we both have iPhones, and you have the ability to see if they've read the message or not. I made him change it in the hospital where I could see that he actually read the message, because I couldn't tell if he was getting my messages or not, you know. So ever since then, I mean, we've kept it like that. And there's no, you know, just little things like that that he
Of
just,
course, now she's like, "I seen you read that. Why didn't you reply?"
Yeah, why didn't you text me back? Yep.
yeah.
Well,
So,
I think we nailed down the title for this episode, the little things.
yeah.
Going back, another like underlying theme that I'm seeing a lot within this story is something we talked about on last week's podcast, and something that we're kind of pushing in 2026, but it's gratitude. So, you know, what we're talking about with doing these little things and then showing that gratitude. I think when it comes to first responder spousal relationships, gratitude is probably one of the most overlooked, because first responders are terrible at accepting thank yous. Um, whether it's people bringing cookies to the firehouse, which we absolutely eat. It's Mike knows, for whatever reason, when that person's at the front door with like, "We made you cookies for a thank you," is the most awkward conversation you've ever seen us have. That's like, if you want to throw a fireman off his game, thank him for what he does, because we don't think about it. But the funny thing is the thank yous from our spouse, even though we're terrible at accepting them, they still matter, because that's for the most part who we care about, and it's coming from them. So kind of that gratitude train goes both ways. It pulls into both stations. So you want to make those deposits of gratitude in both spouses bank, for lack of a better term. I think that's from His Needs, Her Needs is another book. But when you read that one, it talks a lot about these deposits we make in our spouse's account, and to keep them, positive. So negatives or nagging would be withdrawal from that account. But keep each other's accounts full of the thank yous for the little things, and I think that's what's going to keep them going.
I love that.
Showing
Yes.
gratitude for good communication, just like we saw with him realizing, my phone's at the firehouse, I'm gonna be late. She doesn't know where I'm at, she's gonna put these pieces together. So here we're thinking about that communication that it's going to take to kind of put our spouse at ease. And there's a lot of times that our first responder service, whether it's from hospital, police department, fire department, wherever, it takes such a front seat in our lives. And first responders are really good at checking into the job. So when we check into work, we can put so much shit on the back burner. It's incredible, because we can lock in and stay focused around the firehouse. What's crazy is we cannot do the opposite when we leave work. First responders struggle to check out of the places that they came from. Um, and that's something that we as a community need to be better, to be more present at home, which is, a topic in and of itself. But, when we look at our ability to check into work and how hard we can kind of cut off our family or our spouse to focus on the job, we need to be able to check out just as hard. But I love that you guys increased kind of that on duty little things communication, to just kind of help keep that tether to home. And I think that's really helpful for the non first responder spouse, because we oftentimes just kind of take for granted, like, hey, you married into this, you knew I was going to be gone for 2-3 days, you knew what I do is dangerous, you signed up for this. Well, our marriage is just as long as our careers, and in most cases longer. Marriage is a very sensitive topic too within first responders. Our divorce rates are through the roof. So, why is that? Is it because we're not doing the little things? Is it because we're not showing gratitude? Is it because we're not checking in? I would venture a guess it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if any, I just wanted to tell our story and don't wait, you know, get out there and find somebody. You know, there's plenty of counselors out there um, that can help
Yeah, I
and
think that's
definitely help me.
definitely the biggest takeaway too is, from Heather's aspect, like you said, don't wait. Try anything, try everything. Notice the warning signs, the red flags, all those things going on that we're all aware of, but we're just like, yeah, it'll be all right. And then I guess from the first responder side too, when we get home and the wife's in a bad mood or snapping off, it's like instead of saying, well, what's wrong with you? I'm fine. I'm the one that's been at work for 48 hours. What are you complaining
Right.
about? You know, and then I think we get into the whole other topic of comparing why my day was shittier than yours instead of
Right.
just saying, oh yeah, I get that. I can see why that sucked. Because I'm bad at it, where it's like, because I think even if you have kids, you understand that, and then being a first responder, you're like, you come home, well, I only slept 2 hours last night. Well, the kid was up 4. I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't get to go back to bed. You did.
Right.
And then
Right.
it becomes that competition of
Yeah.
whose night was shittier, mine or yours, versus us just both looking at each other saying, okay, it both sucked. Maybe we could both try to get a nap today.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just outside of sleep. I mean, there's so many aspects of the spouse being at home and then us being gone that we take for granted, the little things that the spouse is doing while we're stuck at work and what we're doing when I think from the other side of it too is sometimes the spouses take for granted when we get the comment of, well, you're off for 4 days. Why didn't this get done? Well, it's like, all right, well, I need a day to recover.
Right.
And then, I do need some time to get things done that I couldn't get done for 2 days. And, like Robin said, sometimes our brains don't turn off when we leave. So we're not thinking about all the little things at home that didn't get done for 48 hours. We're thinking about all the big things that we didn't do at work, or the little things we didn't do at work, or we're just trying to get focused back into life at home. It's almost like, for me, it's almost like a transition. When I come back home, I got to figure out how to be a father and a husband again. And it takes me a minute because I had to turn that all off for 48 hours.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Becca got lucky that my nervous habit is cleaning. That's how I spin down. But yeah, that's not for everybody, but that or the duvet cover story.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was a that was
Right.
another that was another little things.
That was
Right.
your traumatic experience.
It was for whatever reason. And I think that's good that we're talking about too. And Mike and I have covered this as well in the past, is acknowledging terrible things. So that's something that first responders are bad at, because when a terrible thing happens, we immediately move to blocking it out. Or in James's case, well, I lived through it, didn't I? All right, I'm back. I'm ready to go.
Right.
We do not do a good job of taking stock in terrible things that happen, no matter, how big or small they may be, but, really taking a look at what just happened and, acknowledging like, man, that was really bad. Um, and where do we go from there? Was it bad enough, that I need help? And Heather, I would imagine you would have never thought that. Um,
No.
that
No.
it
I
would
never
have.
thought I was going to be diagnosed with PTS. I'm like, that's not me. That's first responders that get diagnosed, not the spouse. But yeah. And my counselor said, I do not diagnose this very often. He's like, I am very, meticulous about who he said, but you definitely have have everything. So, like I said, it's been work, but, and just little things like just the anxiety of him, getting back on the truck, getting healthy again. I remember one time, it was shortly after he had healed. They were going to do some work out at church and it was very cold, and it was like, so it was February.
Mhm.
So it was not very long after he'd healed. And his poor mother, I mean, I just lost it just because I'm like, no, he can't go. I just got him back. He can't be out. He's going to get pneumonia, just all the things. So, yeah, it takes a while, but hard work and just don't wait to reach out. Like, why do we do that to ourselves? So
Yeah, and our side is, I think it was because I was deprived of oxygen for so long that it finally took so long to click that, they go through as much as we do, sometimes more, and us recognizing that and not pushing the buttons, so to speak,
Yeah,
is is the what I would say was I learned out of it
yeah,
was that,
they get that wonderful vicarious trauma through us, but also
right,
their own trauma that is being impacted from their personal or their their personal endeavor. Um,
right,
it's almost like like you said, it's twofold on their side. They might not be living the experience, but they're living it through us, and then also the experience they have living their own
yeah,
life through it. Uh, that's a great way to put it. I think that's something to push forward to the first responders out there. Remember, just because we love the statement, but did you die? As
right,
our cap for what is considered a problem.
right,
That not everybody lives in that mentality. Well, nobody died, so it's good. Quit worrying about
right,
right.
it.
Everything's fine.
Yeah. So, and I think it's I think we've hit a lot of topics and a lot of very good points. Like Robin said, I think the topic or the title of the episode and what to take home from this is the little things, and how many little things are we missing. So we're rolling up on time, so I'm kind of reeling it in now and gonna say, I appreciate you guys coming out. One of the things I do at the end of every episode now, the last few we've done, is I like to everybody in the room just kind of give one piece of advice moving forward for their first responder, or Heather, in your case, for spouses, or the first responder, is just one short piece of advice that if they make it to the end of this episode, that they can, take home with them and put it in their bank for what they can do for themselves. So,
Mine would just be grateful and don't I mean the whole title of this episode, the little things, you know, really really matter. The little things.
yep.
What
yeah,
was yours?
yeah, and I would say that even now she'll I know when she's not, I guess, or upset about something or, something's not going right or whatever. So I'll step in, like, especially with our daughter, you can tell when her voice is starting to, and then I'll come in and say, okay, I got it. And give her that minute to, and then she comes right back. She's like, okay, I'm ready. I'm good. Just kind of break that, like, okay, so that's what I would say to you, is just be cautious of that and just pay attention to your spouse,
Yep.
you know.
Love it. Nick?
Uh, those are good, so I'm not going to repeat them. Um, but the other thing is checking in with our spouse. We've covered a lot about the first responder checking in with themselves. Do I need help? The other thing is, maybe after this episode, just ask your spouse, like, hey, do you, are you doing okay? Do you need, is that something that we should look into? And I know how everybody's, schedule is, and like, oh, great,
Yeah.
just another thing. But just from what we learned from Heather and James's story here is, do that check-in and then get the help. If that answers anything other than like, no, everything's great, then start the ball rolling, because it could take up to 2 years to figure out. And that can be a very long 2 years for you as a couple, or that may cause problems within your relationship that later become something you can't fix. Um, so, as a first responder, check in with your spouse and make sure that, they have what they need. And whether you're using EAP or, any of the counselors that, Break the Stigma suggests, just maybe sometimes getting started on that path and having that third party check in on you and what you got going on.
Yeah, I like it. I think to end it, I'll touch on all three of those because I can't really top any of them. But, be grateful for what you have, be grateful for the little things. As James says, be present, be at home, be with your family. And then Nick, I love your point of, reaching out and checking on your spouse. But even, like you said, schedules are packed. Take 5 minutes a week and just sit down together and say, what's going on with you? What's going on with me? Let's talk about it. And then the good old Nickinism, as we can call it, is, do you want to talk about it, or do we need to go do something about it? figure out what the plan is. But also, as you said, with the waiting a year, waiting 2 years, like I tell people, is when we talk about mental health, it's stage 1 or stage 4. It's a lot easier to fix things at stage 1 than it is stage 4.
Yes.
Don't, even as a spouse or as a couple, don't wait till stage 4 to figure out how to make things better. So on that, I'll end it there, and I do appreciate everybody who's listening. Always, if you have suggestions, topics, or you'd like to join us in any way, let us know. You can get a hold of us on any of our socials at Break the Stigma Inc. You can check out the website www.breakthestigmainc.com. Email me anytime at breakthestigmainc@gmail.com. As always, we appreciate you listening. Push in your chair, put your cup in the dishwasher, and thank you for listening to this episode of Kitchen Table Talk.